Engine start. 4, 3, 2, 1, and liftoff.
Flight controllers here looking very carefully at the situation. Obviously a major malfunction.
The Space Shuttle program was one of the most ambitious feats of human engineering ever undertaken. Although never fully living up to its goals, it was undoubtedly an incredible program. Designed as a cheap, reliable, and efficient way to transport cargo and crew to low Earth orbit, the Space Shuttle flew a combined 135 missions over the course of 3 decades, launching several satellites, space telescopes such as the famed Hubble, and components of the International Space Station. The full stack consisted of 2 flanking solid rocket motors, otherwise known as SRBs, a large disposable liquid fuel external tank, and the orbiter itself. Everything except the external tank was refurbished and reused for a later flight. The program was also built as a way for everyday people to visit space, one such group being teachers. In 1984, the president at the time, Ronald Reagan, devised a project primarily for the purpose of inspiring students and enacting interest in STEM fields, allowing such teachers to engage in lessons live from an orbiting shuttle. The first of which being represented by New Hampshire high school teacher Krista McAuliffe, one of the Challenger 7. The date was January 28, 1986. It was a frigid morning in Cape Canaveral with temperatures reaching into the 20s. With icicles present on the Space Shuttle stack, it was right to assume a launch could not take place safely. The launch of Challenger had been delayed 5 times due to bad weather, with the date finally chosen being the coldest temperature a shuttle had ever launched in, roughly 15 degrees lower than the previous coldest launch. And here, eating their last meal before launch, sit the Challenger 7, Commander Dick Scobie, Pilot Michael Smith, Mission Specialist Ronald McNair, Mission Specialist Ellison Onizuka, Mission Specialist Judy Resnick, Payload Specialist Gregory Jarvis, and Payload Specialist Krista McAuliffe. After the completion of their meal, the crew boarded a NASA transport vehicle and began to drive to the launch site. Sally Ride, the first American woman in space, famously said, "The stars don't look bigger, but they do look brighter." Now strapped into her seat and having completed pre-launch checks, the first teacher in space was ready to share an experience like Mrs. Ride did just 2.5 years earlier. At 11:39 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, STS-51L lifted off the pad and ascended rapidly into the cold January air. There was no immediate evidence of anything wrong to the flight controllers or the astronauts themselves, leading to the perception of a perfect launch. As 2.5 million students watched the first teacher grace the stars, history was seemingly being made. But that history was not what they thought.
104%.
Challenger, go with throttle up.
Challenger, go with throttle up. 1 minute 15 seconds. Velocity 2,900 feet per second.
How did this happen? How did a government agency allow for the death of 7 American citizens, one being a teacher, on live television? To understand this, you have to understand the cause of the disaster.
The Space Shuttle Challenger broke apart and killed all 7 crew members due to a fatal flaw in the right SRB. These rocket motors were developed by Utah-based company Morton Thiokol. The problem was focused on what was known as an O-ring. This structural component was a rubber seal designed to prevent hot gas from escaping the booster during the extreme stresses of launch. However, an ongoing issue with them was being investigated by a task force consisting of Thiokol and Marshall Flight Center engineers at the time of Challenger. The issue was as follows. During low temperatures, the rubber O-ring seals in the SRBs become substantially less flexible and orbital, allowing for an extreme risk of failure. This blow-by, as engineers were calling it, was being witnessed on multiple shuttle flights, beginning with STS-2 and was specifically extensive on STS-51C and 51B. The temperatures for the latter 2 flights were 53 and 84 degrees Fahrenheit respectively. The temperature at launch for Challenger was 26. A solution to this problem was given but was denied by NASA due to the already overpriced and behind shuttle program. According to the report of the Presidential Commission on the Space Shuttle Challenger accident, in July 1985, after a nozzle joint on STS-51B showed erosion of the secondary O-ring, indicating that the primary seal failed, a launch constraint was placed on Flight 51F and subsequent launches. These constraints had been imposed and regularly waived by the Solid Rocket Booster project manager at Marshall, Lawrence B. Molloy. This led to unacceptable safety procedures at NASA and its facilities. Concerns regarding this very real issue were being largely ignored or improperly conveyed to officials. One Air Force official regarded the O-ring as important as a plane's wing. A catastrophic failure could ensue if the shuttle was launched in temperatures below 53 degrees Fahrenheit. NASA, Thiokol, and all other personnel that were knowledgeable about this critical design flaw had the responsibility to prevent this launch from occurring and failed to do so. The night before the fateful launch day, officials from Morton Thiokol and NASA engaged in a teleconference to discuss whether to postpone the launch. Roger Boyce-Jolly said during the Presidential Commission that, quote, "There was never one positive pro-launch statement ever made by anybody." Extensive effort was made by qualified and informed people to prevent Challenger from launching, and NASA still proceeded with this. Additionally, not one single Challenger astronaut was present at any critical discussion of delaying the launch and were largely unaware that the solid rocket motor had any issues at all. The likely reason for this decision was the unrealistic launch cadence NASA put in place for 1986. There were 15 launches set for that year, and by the time of Challenger, almost a month had already passed of it. This combined with the excessive delays that already plagued STS-51L led to extremely risky and poor management, resulting in the Challenger disaster. The astronauts had every single right and reason to know about the issues involved in their launch, and they were not informed. Similarly, NASA had an extreme responsibility for the 7 lives aboard Challenger and failed after several warnings spanning years. This was truly a dark time for every party involved, especially for the families of those that were killed, and an immense lesson for NASA as a whole. There is no doubt NASA made a horrible and grave mistake flying Challenger on that fateful day. Because of this decision, 7 astronauts with friends, families, and people who cared about them are no longer alive. NASA had the ability to prevent this tragedy from occurring and failed to do so. Their responsibility to keep these astronauts safe and alive was not only for the astronauts themselves, but for the ones who cared about them. Everyone involved had the right to know about this issue, and it was kept dark and not conveyed to the direct people it was going to affect. This was an extreme tragedy for NASA, and after a brief no-flight period, the shuttle returned to the stars on September 29, 1988. The space shuttle was an incredible vehicle, but it did not come without its hardships. Challenger, the Earth's cosmic sailboat, was taken by the waves of danger and sunken by the ones who built the ship.
I know it's hard to understand, but sometimes painful things like this happen. It's all part of the process of exploration and discovery. It's all part of taking a chance and expanding man's horizons. The future doesn't belong to the faint-hearted. It belongs to the brave. The Challenger crew was pulling us into the future, and we'll continue to follow them.